questions that I get asked all the time is, well, what's happened to the rest of the kids? Porky, which was the other fat kid, was born in Fort Worth. He joined the gang about 1934. He grew up, he literally grew himself out of his part in 5 years, and he left the gang in 1939. Buckwheat joined the gang in 1934 and stayed until they stopped making them, as I did, at MGM in 1944. Unfortunately, Porky's alive still, by the way, and lives in Longmont, Colorado. Buckwheat, unfortunately, died of a heart attack in his apartment in Los Angeles in 1980. However, I did get to see him at a reunion there in 1979 before he died. Alfalfa was from Paris, Illinois, joined the gang in 1935, left in 1941, and he died an early death. He was a hunting and fishing guide, and he got in an argument with his partner in this business, and over a dog that had become lost. And Alfalfa found the dog and returned it to his partner, and had posted a $50 reward. Alfalfa wanted the reward. The guy wouldn't give it to him. Alfalfa pulled a knife on him, and the guy shot him in self-defense. So, unfortunately, Alfalfa left us a little too early in 1959. But the other kids, there's a lot of the other kids that we can talk about now, but I don't have that much time. Myself, I joined the gang in 31. I left in 44, and I grew up back in Dallas, moved back to Dallas, did a little thing in the Air Force, finally fried enough hamburgers and parked a few cars, and I felt I didn't want to do that the rest of my life. So I went into sales. I went into a sales career for Chinese Visconti Wine in California. After that, I went to work for Philco Ford Corporation, which some of you fine amount of dealers out there may have carried some of the products. I was with them for 11 years in the appliance and electronics division. After that, I was 8 years with Magic Chef Appliance Company out of Cleveland, Tennessee. And so I've spent 19 years of my sales career in the appliance business, and I have a lot of camaraderie with you folks out there. I think it's a great business. And oh, by the way, Henry Meyer told me tonight, he says, since you're an old appliance man, would you kindly just mention the fact that when you dealers get home, there will be a slight price increase waiting for you when you get back. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But anyway, I retired 3 years ago, and now I do a little 2-hour college show. I take them around to the universities and do some for the conventions of the corporations. And this is just a portion of the film and lecture show that I do. There is another clip here that I want to show you. It's a clip that we took today, and we got it developed. This is some fantastic film that we took out at Finkbine Golf Course today. So if you will please roll the tape that we took today, please. The young gal that you saw on the door, on the barn door that we were going down the hill on, was Darla Hood. She was a member of the gang. She joined the gang in 1935 when Alfalfa did. She was from Levy, Oklahoma, by the way. She left the gang about 1943, about a year before they stopped making them all together. But being from Levy, Oklahoma, it kind of reminds me of a story. There's not very many people know this, but Roy Clark and I went into the oil business together one time. We had an offer made to us to invest in a well. And this well was being drilled in a little town in Oklahoma called Maud. And the only way that you could get to Maud was through Bolegs. The only way you could get to Maud was through, yeah, I told her right. Well, you know where Maud is. But anyway, that's a true story. But anyway, they were drilling the well, and we made a well, and they were completing the well, and I got a phone call. I was in Fort Worth at the time. I got a phone call, and the driller said, "You got to get up here right away." It says, "We've got a fire on this well." So I said, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do?" I just jumped in my car. It wasn't really that far. It was about an hour and a half away, and I drove, broke all the speed limits and everything, and got up to the well site, and this thing was really going. I mean, flames were going 300 feet in the air. And this was a serious thing, you know. We had a lot of money in this well. So I asked the driller, I said, "What are we going to do?" And he says, "Well," he says, "you know, the only thing to do, you got to call a guy that'll put it out." I said, "Who?" He says, "Well, Red Adair is the best in the business." And I said, "Well, yeah, Red Adair." I said, "Yeah, I've heard of him." I said, "How did we get a hold of him?" He says, "Well," he says, "I'll try to put a call in for him." He says, "But you better call Roy and tell him what we've got here." So I said, "Okay, you handle that and I'll call Roy." So I called Roy, and he came apart. He said, "Well, what are we going to do?" I said, "Well, we got to call into Red Adair." He said, "Wait a minute." He says, "Doesn't he charge an awful lot of money?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I guess so, Roy, but I mean, you know, after all, we got thousands of dollars burning up here every minute." And he said, "Well, yeah, I know that," but he says, "You know, he's going to have to come all the way from Houston." And he says, "What I'd like," he says, "Isn't there anybody else you can get?" He says, "Red Adair's going to cost us $1 million. And I said, "Well, I don't know anybody to get." He said, "Well, look at the yellow pages." So I said, "Okay, Roy." So I said, "I'll call you back in a little bit." So I looked at the yellow pages, and sure enough, I found another well firefighting company in Oklahoma City. So I called him up, and it was Ruben Adair Gonzalez Firefighting Company. So I gave him a call, and Ruben answered the phone, and I told him what the situation was, and he says, "Yeah." He says, "That's no problem." I said, "But wait a minute." I said, "I know you can do the job." And I said, "What are you going to charge me?" He says, "Well, from what you've told me," he says, "it's going to run about $750,000. And I said, "Well," I said, that's pretty expensive." He said, "Well, we may be able to get it done for $600,000. And I said, "Okay." I said, without even calling Roy back, I approved the deal because I figured, well, we're going to save $400,000 right off the bat. And, you know, at least he can buy a new guitar with that. So we called Ruben back, and he says, "I'll be there in an hour." So we were all waiting around out at the well site, and all of a sudden we see this big cloud of smoke coming up this road, coming up to the well site. And, of course, we all knew that it was Ruben Adair Gonzalez. And as they got closer, we could see that he was in the cab of this 1940 Ford flatbed truck, and he had all of his cousins and nieces and nephews and brothers and uncles and everything on the back of this flatbed truck with their sombreros and the serapes on and everything. And they rolled into the well site and rolled right into the fire, and all these Mexicans jumped off the truck and began beating this fire out with their hats and the serapes and stomping on them with their feet and everything, and they put the fire out. And they did it very quickly. So I said, "I'll tell you what, fella," I said, "that's the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life." And Ruben says, "Well, thank you very much." But he says, "I'll tell you what," he says, "it's going to run just a little bit more money than the $600,000 I told you." And I said, "Well," I said, "Okay, within reason." I said, "What do you think it's going to run?" He says, probably $600,000, $150. And I said, "Fine." I said, "That's great." So without further ado, I just wrote him out a check, handed it to him, and, you know, I was so happy that we had this fire out. And I said, "By the way, Ruben," I said, "what are you going to do with all of that money?" And he says, "Well, Mr. McFarland," he says, "I think the first thing I'm going to do is put some brakes on that truck."